Translate. Right now. The billionaire's voice didn't rise, didn't crack, didn't even hurry, yet it cut through the penthouse like the clean strike of a gavel. The room had been humming a second earlier with polite laughter and champagne small talk, the kind that floats over a marble floor without ever touching it. Now even the crystal glasses seemed to hold their breath. The skyline beyond the glass walls glowed like a jeweled circuit board, grids of light stretching for miles, and the air smelled faintly of lemon polish and expensive cologne, sharp, bright, and untouchable. On a long table wrapped in dark leather, a contract sat perfectly centered beside a fountain pen that looked more like jewelry than a tool. A slim digital clock, no larger than a phone, blinked red numbers in the corner, 09:58, 09:57, counting down toward a signature everyone in the room had been calling historic. Sheikh Alexander Alston, American by passport, Middle Eastern by heritage, billionaire by the quiet way people straightened when he moved, stood at the head of the table with the calm of a man who could buy time if he wanted. He had spent the last hour listening to executives praise themselves in rehearsed sentences, nodding like he was amused. But when he switched languages, smooth, deliberate Arabic, the kind that belonged in old books and family rooms, something invisible shifted. He didn't look at the executives first. He didn't look at the lawyers. His gaze slid past the tailored suits and glittering watches, past the confident smiles that suddenly looked overpainted, and landed on the far edge of the room where the light didn't quite reach. That's where Emma Carter stood, white-skinned, 17 at most, hair pulled back too neatly like she was trying to disappear into her own shadow. She wasn't seated. She wasn't offered water. She was beside her mother's cleaning cart, hands folded, fingertips faintly chalked with dust from places no one important ever noticed. Her mom, Lily Carter, wore a plain uniform that made her look like part of the building, necessary, ignored, replaceable. Lily's eyes flicked toward the table and then down again, the way someone learns to survive in rooms that weren't built for them. A man in a blue suit, Grant Weller, the lead advisor, let out a short laugh like the moment was a clever joke meant for him. Arabic? That's a fun flex, he said, smiling toward the others as if to invite them back into comfort. A woman near him, Madeline Pierce, draped in silk and confidence, tilted her chin and whispered loud enough to be heard. Must be nice to collect languages the way he collects penthouses. Another guest snorted. Someone else murmured, "We're in Manhattan, not a museum." And then, as if it were the most natural thing in the world, Grant gestured toward Emma with a dismissive flick of his hand. "Hey," he said, not bothering to lower his voice. "Can you tell her to move? This is a private meeting. Staff shouldn't bring their kids." The words landed like cold water. Lily's shoulders stiffened, but she didn't turn. Emma didn't move either. She felt every gaze slide toward her, the weight of them pressing her back against the wall. In that instant, she understood the rule of places like this. You could polish their floors, but you couldn't leave footprints. Sheikh Alexander spoke again in Arabic, slow, precise, almost gentle, and the question hung in the air with a strange, careful rhythm. The executives shifted, smiling too quickly, nodding as if they understood, then glancing at each other for help. A lawyer cleared his throat, ready to perform. Grant lifted his hand like he was about to volunteer the right answer. Madeline's smile sharpened, certain the maid's daughter would shrink. But Emma's eyes had changed, not wide with fear, focused, alert, like someone who had been quietly listening to the world for a long time. She recognized something in his phrasing, something old and deliberate, like a key turned the wrong way on purpose. Her pulse didn't race, it steadied. She could hear the clock, 09:41, 09:40. She could hear Lily's breath, thin and careful, as if one wrong sound might cost them everything. Emma swallowed once, tasting lemon and nerves, and her lips parted before she could talk herself out of it. "Excuse me," she said softly, not to the room, but to the man at the head of the table. Then, in the same Arabic he had used, she answered. Emma did not raise her voice, but the Arabic landed with quiet confidence, each word placed like a coin on a counter, exact and unmistakable. For a heartbeat, the penthouse felt as if it had lost power. No laughter, no whispered side comments, no clink of glass. Grant Weller's smile held for half a second too long, then thinned into something brittle. Madeline Pierce blinked, Her expression stuck between disbelief and irritation, as though the room had broken a rule without asking permission. Lily Carter's hands tightened around the card handle, knuckles paling, her eyes fixed on a spot on the marble, as if looking up might invite punishment. The red numbers on the small digital clock kept ticking, indifferent, 09:33, 09:32, and still nobody moved to stop it. Sheikh Alexander Alston did not react the way powerful men in movies react. There was no theatrics, no sudden anger, no dramatic gesture. His gaze simply sharpened, like a camera coming into focus. He held Emma's eyes for a long moment, then asked another question in Arabic, softer than before, the kind of question that sounded simple but carried a second meaning underneath. This time the executives did not even pretend they understood. A lawyer's mouth opened and closed with nothing to offer. Grant cleared his throat, trying to reclaim the stage. "That is impressive," he said quickly, switching back to English as though language itself belonged to him. "But we are here to finalize the agreement. We have professional translators. This is not a classroom exercise." He reached toward the contract with a confident hand, the pen glinting beside it, and he smiled at Sheikh Alexander the way someone smiles at a man they believe they are managing. "We have a schedule," Grant added, tapping the table near the countdown clock like it was a harmless prop. "If we miss the signing window, the press is going to swarm. We should not be distracted." Emma's heart beat once, solid and steady, but her stomach tightened. She had not spoken to show off. She had spoken because she heard what the Arabic was doing. It was not a party trick. It was a test, a trap set with polite phrasing. The words Sheikh Alexander used were ancient leaning, formal, and deliberately chosen, and within them was a hinge, a single term that could swing a sentence from protection into surrender. Emma had seen that kind of trick before, not in penthouses, but in school offices, in rental agreements, in the way adults spoke around her mother when they thought Lily would not understand. People had sharp edges inside smooth language. And in Sheikh Alexander's question, Emma had heard the sharp edge immediately. She swallowed and kept her posture still, because she knew what Grant was counting on, that a maid's daughter would panic, stumble, apologize, retreat. She did none of those things. She answered again in Arabic, this time carefully, respectfully, and when she reached the dangerous term, she replaced it with the correct one and explained the difference in a single calm sentence, the way a teacher corrects a mistake without humiliating the student. The air changed. Madeline's eyes flicked to Grant. Grant's jaw flexed. A murmur started at the far end of the table and died instantly when Sheikh Alexander lifted one finger, not as a threat, but as a quiet request for silence. Then he turned to Grant and spoke in English at last, his tone mild enough to be almost friendly. "You said you have professional translators," he said. "Tell me which one approved that wording." Grant's face warmed, his confidence scrambling for footing. "It is standard language," he insisted. "It is vetted. We have used it in multiple deals." Emma felt Lily's breath catch, a tiny sound. Lily did not look at her daughter, but Emma could feel the message in her mother's stillness. "Please do not make this worse. Please do not take their anger home with us." Emma wanted to obey. She wanted to step back into invisibility, to let the people with titles and money fight their battles. But the clock kept ticking, 08:58, 08:57, and Emma understood, with sudden clarity, that if she stayed quiet now, someone would sign something they did not truly understand, and the room would pretend ignorance later. Sheikh Alexander's eyes returned to her, not demanding, not flattering, simply waiting. And in that waiting, Emma realized the most dangerous thing about being underestimated was that it trained you to doubt your own certainty. She forced herself to breathe. "Sir," she said gently, in English now, because everyone needed to understand this part. "The Arabic does not say what they told you it says. It changes who carries the risk. If you sign it like this, you are not buying a partnership. You are buying the blame." The words left Emma's mouth and seemed to hover above the leather-bound table, too heavy for the room's polished air. For the first time all night, the people in tailored suits stopped performing. Madeline Pierce's lips parted as if she wanted to laugh again, but nothing came out. Two executives stared at the contract like it had transformed into something unfamiliar. Grant Weller's hand remained near the pen, fingers stiff, as though he could still force the moment forward by sheer will. The countdown clock continued, bright and indifferent, 08:49. 08:48. Its glow reflecting in the pen's metal like a warning nobody wanted to acknowledge. Lily Carter finally lifted her gaze, just a fraction, and for one fragile second mother and daughter shared the same fear. That speaking truth in a room like this was not brave, it was expensive. Sheikh Alexander did not ask Emma to repeat herself. He did not demand proof with hostility. He simply reached for the contract and turned it toward himself, scanning the Arabic section with the calm attention of someone reading a familiar map. Then he slid it toward the attorney at his side, a gray-haired woman with glasses and a posture that did not bend for anyone, and he said one sentence in Arabic that sounded like a request, but carried the weight of a command. The attorney's eyes moved quickly. Her face did not change much, but the slightest pause at one line was enough. Sheikh Alexander's gaze drifted to Grant, quiet, steady, unblinking. "You told me this was vetted," he said in English. His tone stayed polite, which somehow made the question sharper. "You told me it matched the English." Grant's laugh came out too fast, too bright. "It does," he said, rushing as if speed could replace certainty. "It is a standard indemnity clause. Everyone signs those. The language is formal, but the meaning is the same. We are not going to derail an 8-figure partnership over a teenager's interpretation." He leaned back, throwing a glance around the room that silently asked others to join him, to rescue him with shared confidence. A few people shifted, uncomfortable, but nobody spoke up. Madeline recovered first, smoothing her expression into something condescending and controlled. "Sheikh Alexander," she said sweetly. "It is charming that she knows a few phrases, but this is business. We should let adults handle adult matters." The word adult landed like a slap wrapped in velvet. Emma felt heat creep up her neck, not from shame, but from the familiar sting of being reduced to a label. She wanted to step back behind her mother's cart, to become invisible again. She could almost hear Lily's earlier warning: "Do not draw attention. Do not invite trouble." But then Sheikh Alexander spoke in Arabic again, and this time he did not address Emma. He addressed the room. His sentence was longer, richer, and the tone shifted, still calm, but now layered with something that made even the confident people straighten in their seats. Emma understood every word. He was not asking for a translation. He was setting a trap, placing a meaning on the table, and watching who tried to push it away. Grant nodded too quickly, pretending comprehension. Madeline smiled as if she understood too, but her eyes flickered to Grant for reassurance. Emma saw it in that flicker. They were guessing. They were bluffing. And Sheikh Alexander had designed the moment to expose exactly that. The attorney cleared her throat. "The Arabic clause does not mirror the English," she said carefully. "It shifts liability in a way that is not favorable." Grant's face tightened. "That is an overstatement," he snapped, then caught himself and forced a smile. "Legal language can sound dramatic. We can adjust later. We just need the signature for the press release." The press release. Emma heard it, and felt something settle in her chest like a stone. They were willing to lock a man into a bad deal for the sake of a headline. And if Sheikh Alexander signed, they would call it success. If he suffered later, they would call it unfortunate. Emma looked at her mother. Lily's eyes shone, but she held her chin still, fighting the instinct to pull her daughter back. Lily had spent years surviving by being silent. Emma had spent years learning that silence did not always keep you safe. It only kept you unseen. The clock blinked. 08:12. 08:11. Sheikh Alexander rested his fingertips on the contract and did not pick up the pen. Instead, he looked at Emma like she was the only honest instrument in the room. "Tell me," he said, voice low enough to feel personal, "if I sign this as written, what exactly happens when something goes wrong?" Emma inhaled slowly, choosing words that would not sound like an attack, because truth delivered with cruelty would only give them a reason to dismiss her. "If something goes wrong," she said, steady, "the Arabic makes you responsible even when you are not at fault. It says you accept the burden, not just the risk. And that, one word," she added, eyes flicking to the line on the page, "is the difference between a partnership and a surrender." Emma's last word, surrender, fell into the silence like a match that did not flare but still changed the air. Grant Weller's chair scraped back a fraction, a nervous sound in a room designed to be noiseless. Madeline Pierce's smile tightened at the corners, and she reached for her glass as if something cold could steady her. Lily Carter looked as though she might step in front of her daughter, not dramatically, but in the small, protective way a mother shields without drawing attention. The countdown clock kept pulsing red, 07:56, 07:55, time pressing forward while the room tried to pretend it was not. Sheikh Alexander Alston did not flinch. He lifted the contract slightly, angling it so the overhead light caught the Arabic paragraph. Then he asked one more question in Arabic, slower than before, almost tender. Emma understood the nuance immediately. He was not testing vocabulary anymore. He was testing intent. Who in this room respected meaning, and who only respected appearances? That word, he said, switching to English on the last phrase so everyone could hear. Who put it there? Grant inhaled sharply, then let out a laugh that sounded practiced. Language differences, he said. Cultural phrasing. It is nothing. He reached out again, palm open, not quite touching the paper, as if he could physically guide the deal back onto the rails. We can revise. We can add an addendum after the signing. This happens all the time. Emma watched his fingers. They were clean, manicured, confident, hands that had never pushed a mop, never wrung out a towel, never learned how hard a person could work and still be treated as disposable. He spoke like someone who assumed the world would forgive him for being careless, because the world often did. Madeline leaned in with a softer tone, the kind used to calm children and manage reputations. Emma, is it? She said, finally acknowledging her name as though that alone was kindness. Sweetheart, you have done enough. You can be proud. Now let the professionals finish. The word sweetheart was wrapped in sugar, but the message was clear. Go back to your corner. Emma felt her cheeks warm. Not from embarrassment. She had lived with embarrassment too long for it to surprise her, but from the pressure of every eye in the room deciding what she was allowed to be. She could feel Lily's fear like a hand on her shoulder, begging her to stop. Emma wanted to stop. She wanted to fold into silence, because silence was what kept her mother employed, what kept the rent paid, what kept them from being labeled trouble. But Sheikh Alexander's gaze did not carry pity. It carried recognition, and that was unfamiliar enough to make Emma hold her ground. I am not trying to embarrass anyone, Emma said carefully, choosing every word like she was walking across glass. But in Arabic, that word changes responsibility. It does not just say you accept risk. It says you accept the burden even when you are innocent. That is not a cultural flourish. That is a legal trap. The attorney beside Sheikh Alexander nodded once, small but unmistakable. Grant's eyes flashed, anger slipping through his smile like a tear in fabric. This is absurd, he snapped, then smoothed his tone again. You are letting a teenager derail months of negotiations. Sheikh Alexander, with respect, this is not how high-stakes deals are handled. High stakes? Emma almost laughed at the irony. The only stakes she had ever known were the ones that came with missing a paycheck, with counting dollars at the grocery store, with praying the landlord would give them another week. But she did not laugh. She looked at the clock instead, 07:14, 07:13, and felt the room's urgency twist into something sharper. Sheikh Alexander reached for the pen at last, and for a split second everyone leaned forward, relief blooming on their faces. Then he did something that made Grant's breath catch. He set the pen down, untouched, and slid it away. Stop the clock, Sheikh Alexander said quietly. One of his assistants hurried to press a button, and the red numbers froze mid-blink. The room froze with them. Sheikh Alexander folded his hands, calm as ever, and said, No one signs anything until I understand why my Arabic was rewritten. Grant's mouth opened, then closed. Madeline's glass trembled slightly in her hand. Lily's eyes filled, not with tears that fell, but with the kind that stay trapped because crying is a luxury. Sheikh Alexander turned to Emma again. You said you are not trying to embarrass anyone, he said. Good. Then help me do this cleanly. He tapped the page once. Tell me what the clause should say if the partnership is honest. Emma's throat tightened, because she realized what he was offering. Not a moment of attention, but a chance to pull truth into the light without cruelty. And she also realized what it could cost her mother if the wrong people felt exposed. Still, she nodded slowly. If it is honest, she said, voice steady, it should say responsibility follows fault. Not status. Not money. Not whoever is easiest to blame. The room had always been designed to make certain people feel large and others feel small. The ceiling was too high, the windows too wide, the furniture too heavy, everything whispering that power belonged to those who could afford space. Emma could feel that design pressing against her ribs as Sheikh Alexander waited for her answer, patient and still, like he had all the time in the world now that the clock had been stopped. Grant Weller's eyes narrowed, not openly hostile yet, but sharp with calculation, as if he was already drafting the story he would tell later. Naive girl, confused clause, overreaction. Madeline Pierce turned her glass slowly, watching Emma the way someone watches a stain they hope will disappear on its own. Lily Carter's lips parted as if she wanted to speak, then closed again, the old habit of silence winning by default. Emma glanced at her mother's hands, still gripping the card handle like it was a lifeline, and the sight steadied her more than any compliment could. Emma had learned her mother's language first, the language of working without being seen, of swallowing pride because pride did not pay rent. But she had also learned a second language in secret, one her mother never asked about, because asking would invite questions they could not afford. Sheikh Alexander's question had opened that hidden door. Responsibility follows fault, Emma repeated softly. Then she shifted back into Arabic, careful and respectful, choosing phrasing that sounded natural to a legal ear and faithful to a moral one. She explained how a fair clause would mirror the English, how it would assign liability based on proven negligence, not on whoever had deeper pockets. She did not speak like a child showing off. She spoke like someone who understood what words could do to a life. The attorney nodded again, this time more visibly, and made a small note in the margin. One of the executives on the far side of the table leaned forward, suddenly interested in a way that felt opportunistic. Another looked down, avoiding eye contact, as if guilt was easier to manage when you did not meet the eyes of the person calling it out. Grant's smile returned, but it was all teeth and no warmth. That is very articulate, he said, stretching each word as if praise could turn the moment harmless. But this is complicated. Sheikh Alexander, you know as well as I do, international agreements require nuance. We cannot take contractual advice from someone who still has homework. A few people chuckled, eager for a bridge back to comfort. Madeline's laughter was lighter, relieved, like she had been handed permission. Emma felt the chuckles brush against her skin, familiar and ugly, but she kept her face calm. She had expected mockery. What she had not expected was Sheikh Alexander's stillness. He did not join the laughter. He did not even blink at it. He looked at Grant with the mild disappointment of a teacher watching a student miss the point on purpose. If you believe it is complicated, Sheikh Alexander said, then you should be able to explain it. He tapped the Arabic paragraph with one finger. Right now? In English. Without theatrics. Grant's throat bobbed. He reached for control again, posture straightening. Of course, he said, then began to speak in polished phrases that sounded impressive while saying almost nothing. He used words like customary, industry standard, mutual protection, and global best practice, building a wall of language meant to tire everyone into agreement. Emma listened closely and realized the trick. He was circling the truth without touching it. He was hoping Sheikh Alexander would get bored and sign just to end the discomfort. Sheikh Alexander waited until Grant finished, then turned his head slightly toward Emma. One sentence, he said. Tell me what he did not. The room stiffened. Lily's breath caught. Emma felt the risk like a cold edge again, but she also felt something else now, a quiet certainty that if she spoke plainly, the wall would fall. He did not say who pays when they are wrong. Emma answered, voice even. He did not say you are protected when you are right. The clause, as written, makes you the default scapegoat. Silence snapped into place. Madeline's glass stopped turning. Grant's face flushed, and for a moment the mask slipped, revealing panic underneath. He leaned toward Sheikh Alexander, lowering his voice as if secrecy could undo what had been heard. This is getting out of hand, he said. We have people waiting downstairs. We have cameras. We have stakeholders. We cannot let a household employee's child hijack the narrative. That sentence was supposed to shame Emma back into her corner, to remind everyone of her rank. But it did something else instead. It reminded Sheikh Alexander of something he had been measuring all along. The billionaire's gaze moved across the room, taking in the nervous smiles, the sudden stillness, the way no one defended Emma except the truth itself. Then he looked at Lily Carter for the first time. Really looked, not as part of the building, but as a person. "What is your name?" he asked her. Lily startled, as if being addressed directly was a mistake. "Lily," she said quietly. "Lily Carter, sir." Sheikh Alexander nodded once. "And Emma Carter," he said, returning his eyes to the girl by the cart. "You did not hijack anything. You revealed it." Grant opened his mouth to protest, but Sheikh Alexander lifted his hand, calm and final. "I will not sign a contract that survives on confusion," he said, "and I will not build a partnership on contempt." Then, with a gentleness that made the room even more uncomfortable, he asked Emma, "Where did you learn Arabic like that?" Emma's throat tightened, because the answer was not glamorous. It was not a resume. It was a memory. "From someone who did not want me to stay invisible," she said softly, and the room leaned in without meaning to. Emma hesitated for the first time, not because she was afraid of the room anymore, but because her answer belonged to a quieter place than this penthouse. The question pulled her backward, away from marble and skyline lights, into a cramped apartment that smelled like laundry soap and cheap takeout, where the heater clicked too loud in winter and the windows rattled when trucks passed. Lily's gaze dropped again, as if she already knew which memories were about to rise, and she did not want the past to climb into this room with them. Grant Weller shifted in his chair, impatient, the way people get when a story threatens to become human. "Madeline." Pierce's expression softened just enough to look polite, but her eyes stayed sharp, as if she was calculating whether this sentiment would photograph well or ruin the brand of the evening. Sheikh Alexander Alston waited without urgency. That was the strange part. In a world where everyone rushed to show value, he was giving Emma the one thing her life rarely offered: time. The stopped clock sat there like a paused heartbeat, and in the silence Emma could hear her own thoughts with uncomfortable clarity. "My grandfather," she said finally, voice low. "Not by blood. He lived in our building. He was the kind of person people walked past." Lily's fingers tightened on the cart handle, and Emma felt a flicker of shame she had fought for years, because the world taught you to be embarrassed of poverty, as if it were a moral failure. "His name was Walter," Emma continued. "Walter Reed. He had a small apartment and an old radio, and he used to sit by the window like he was waiting for the world to remember him." A few people in the room exchanged glances at the name, likely confusing it with a hospital or a landmark. Emma kept going. "He spoke Arabic. Not the kind from television. The kind from letters and prayers and history. He never bragged about it. He just carried it." Grant gave a tight smile. "That is touching," he said, as if trying to package her memory into something harmless. "But it does not make her qualified to interpret international contracts." Emma did not look at him. She kept her eyes on Sheikh Alexander, because he was the only one listening like the details mattered. "Walter told me language is not just words," Emma said. "It is intent. It is responsibility. He said if you learn the language, you learn how people hide things." The attorney's pen paused. Madeline's smile faltered. Lily blinked fast, holding back tears the way she held back everything. "Why would he teach you?" Sheikh Alexander asked, still gentle. Emma swallowed. "Because he saw how people treated my mom," she said. "They talked over her, around her, like she could not understand anything." He said, "Emma, being ignored is a kind of cage. If you cannot break the door, learn the lock." The sentence hung in the air, and for a moment even Grant did not interrupt, because something in it felt too true to mock. Emma's chest tightened as she remembered Walter's hands, spotted with age, holding a battered paperback, tracing Arabic script with a finger that trembled. She remembered the small table between them, the way he would correct her gently, never laughing when she struggled, never making her feel small. "He died last year," Emma added softly, "before he could see any of this." She gestured, not at the wealth, but at the moment, at the fact that her voice had finally entered a room that had tried to erase her. Sheikh Alexander's eyes did not soften with pity. They sharpened with respect. "Walter Reed," he repeated, as if tasting the name with care. Then he asked, "Did he tell you where he learned it?" Emma nodded. "He said he worked overseas when he was young," she said. "He did not talk about it much. He only said he met people who treated him with dignity when he had nothing. So he promised he would do the same for someone else." Grant exhaled loudly, irritated by the sincerity. "We are drifting," he said. "Sheikh Alexander, the deal." Sheikh Alexander lifted a hand, and Grant stopped mid-sentence like a man who had just realized he was not in control of the room anymore. "We are not drifting," Sheikh Alexander said quietly. "We are clarifying." He looked at Emma again. "You understood my Arabic better than my advisors," he said. "And you understood the trap inside that clause faster than my legal team." His tone remained calm, but every word landed like a measured stone. "That tells me something about you," he added. Then his gaze moved across the table, resting on Grant, then on Madeline, then on every polished face that had laughed a few minutes earlier. "And it tells me something about this room." The silence returned, heavier now, not awkward but accountable. Emma felt Lily's shoulder tremble with one small breath, and she realized her mother was not only afraid anymore. She was watching her daughter become visible. The stopped clock glowed red in the corner, waiting, and Emma had a sudden, unsettling thought. If Sheikh Alexander restarted it, the next decision would not be about money. It would be about character. Sheikh Alexander's eyes swept the room once more, not with anger, but with the calm precision of someone taking inventory. The penthouse still smelled like lemon polish and ambition, but now the scent felt sharper, almost accusing, as if the air itself had noticed the performance and stopped applauding. Grant Weller tried to smile again, but his face would not hold it. Madeline Pierce shifted her posture, crossing and uncrossing her ankles, the tiniest sign of discomfort in someone who had built a life on never looking uncomfortable. The attorney beside Sheikh Alexander placed the contract flat on the table, palm resting lightly on the page like a boundary. Lily Carter stayed perfectly still by the cleaning cart, yet Emma could feel her mother's tension in the space between them, a silent plea that had kept them safe for years. Do not make powerful people feel exposed. But it was already too late for that. The room had seen Emma's mind, and the room had seen what Grant and Madeline tried to do with it. Sheikh Alexander spoke again, and this time he did not choose Arabic to impress anyone. He chose it to remove the masks. "When a man cannot answer in the language he claims to understand," he said, voice quiet, "it tells me he is relying on noise." Then he switched back to English and looked directly at Grant. "You told me you prepared this clause," he said. "I am going to ask you a question, and I want a clear answer." Grant straightened, attempting authority. "Of course," he said. "Ask." Sheikh Alexander tapped the page once. "Why is the Arabic more binding than the English?" Grant's throat moved. He glanced at the attorney, then at the executives, searching for someone to rescue him with a distraction. "It is not more binding," he said quickly. "It is equivalent. The phrasing is standard in certain jurisdictions. There is a cultural expectation." "Stop," Sheikh Alexander said, not loud, not harsh, but final. Grant stopped. The silence that followed felt like pressure, the kind you feel when an elevator pauses between floors. Sheikh Alexander turned his head slightly toward the attorney. "Is it equivalent?" The attorney did not hesitate. "No," she said. "The Arabic assigns liability in a broader scope. It is not a mirror. It is a net." A small gasp ran through the table, not dramatic, just the sound of reputations recalculating. Madeline's eyes widened, then narrowed. Then she leaned forward with a smooth, controlled tone. "We can remedy this. With an addendum," she said. "There is no need to embarrass anyone. Everyone here is on the same team." Emma heard the way she said team, like it was a warm blanket meant to cover the sharp edges. Sheikh Alexander did not look at her. "Teams do not hide knives in paperwork," he replied evenly, and the word knife was not violent in his mouth, but symbolic, precise. It described betrayal without describing harm. Madeline's face held, but her cheeks flushed faintly. Grant pushed back from the table, palms open, trying to appear reasonable. "Sheikh Alexander," he said, "this is spiraling. The press downstairs is expecting a signature in under 10 minutes. If we delay, the market will speculate. People will make up stories." Sheikh Alexander's gaze did not move. "I do not fear stories," he said. "I fear agreements built on deception." Then he looked at Emma again. "You said one word changed everything," he said. "Show me where." Emma stepped closer to the table, careful not to touch anything, aware of every unspoken rule in the room. She pointed to the Arabic line and spoke softly, translating not just the words but the intent behind them. "This term here," she said, "can mean responsibility, but in this context it carries the meaning of burden, like a weight you agree to carry no matter who caused it." She looked up and met Grant's eyes for the first time. It makes you the default answer when blame needs a place to land. Grant's face went pale, then reddened. You are twisting it, he snapped. You are a child. Lily flinched as if the insult had struck her. Emma felt something steady rise in her chest. Not pride, not anger, but clarity. She looked back at Sheikh Alexander. If I am wrong, she said calmly, ask any independent Arabic attorney to read it aloud. Do not ask someone paid to keep you comfortable. The room froze again, not because Emma had been dramatic, but because she had been direct. Sheikh Alexander held Grant's gaze for a long moment. Independent, he repeated. Then he reached into his jacket and removed his phone, not hurried, not showy. He placed it on speaker and made one call. The ringtone echoed in the quiet like a metronome. Grant's jaw tightened. Madeline's fingers gripped her glass too hard. Lily's breathing turned shallow. After 2 rings, a voice answered, professional and alert. Sheikh Alexander spoke in Arabic, introducing himself with a quiet authority that did not need titles. I need you to review a clause, he said. Right now? I will read it. Tell me what it binds me to. He began to read the Arabic line, slow and exact. And as the words filled the penthouse, Emma watched Grant's confidence crumble one breath at a time. Because for the first time tonight, the room was no longer a stage. It was a courtroom of conscience. And the verdict was about to arrive on speakerphone. The attorney's pen hovered above the paper, motionless, as if even ink was waiting for permission. Sheikh Alexander's phone lay on the leather table like a small, black witness, its speaker filling the penthouse with a calm voice from somewhere far away. The Arabic legal expert listened without interrupting as Sheikh Alexander finished reading the clause, every syllable measured, every pause deliberate. When he stopped, the silence that followed felt heavier than the city skyline beyond the glass, heavier than the quiet wealth in the room. Grant Weller's shoulders were rigid, his jaw clenched so tight it looked painful, yet he kept his smile ready in the corners like a reflex. Madeline Pierce pressed her lips together and stared at the contract as if staring could rewrite it. Emma stood with her hands folded in front of her, nails clean but plain, posture respectful, trying to look smaller than she felt, because she knew what happened to people who looked too confident in rooms that did not want them. Lily Carter's eyes stayed on the phone, wide and shining, as if she had never heard a powerful man ask a question on behalf of someone like her. The voice on speaker cleared its throat softly. In its current form, the expert said in English first, careful and professional. This clause obligates you to assume liability beyond the scope described in the English. It is not equivalent. The sentence landed like a door locking. A few people at the table inhaled sharply. Grant's smile froze. Madeline's fingers tightened around her glass, then relaxed, then tightened again. The expert continued, now in Arabic, adding nuance, and Emma understood the full weight of it. The clause did not just broaden responsibility, it positioned Sheikh Alexander as the default payer for anything that went wrong, even if he was only loosely connected to the event. It was the kind of language that looked polite until it had to perform. Sheikh Alexander listened without reacting, then asked a final question, still on speaker, his tone calm enough to sound almost curious. If someone inserted this deliberately, he said, would you consider it an error or a strategy? The expert did not hesitate. It would be a strategy, the voice replied. A sophisticated one. The words strategy and sophisticated should have sounded like compliments, but in this room they sounded like an accusation wrapped in velvet. Sheikh Alexander thanked the expert, ended the call, and set the phone down gently, as if he respected even the object that had delivered the truth. Then he looked at Grant Weller. He did not raise his voice. He did not slam his hand on the table. He simply waited, the way a judge waits when the evidence is already on the record. Grant tried to speak, but his first attempt came out as a breath. He recovered with speed. This is a misunderstanding, he said. A drafting oversight. One of the junior associates probably. Stop, Sheikh Alexander said softly. The single word cut through the excuse like a clean line through fog. Grant stopped. Madeline leaned forward again, voice syrupy, desperate to regain social control. Sheikh Alexander, let us not make this personal, she said. It is business. We correct it, we move on. Nobody has to lose face. Lose face. Emma heard it and felt the truth of the room. They were not afraid of wrongdoing. They were afraid of being seen. Sheikh Alexander's gaze shifted to Madeline, not harsh, just unwavering. When someone hides a trap in language, he said, it is already personal. Then his eyes returned to Grant. You told me you understand Arabic, he said. You told me you reviewed this. Grant's throat worked. I do not speak it fluently, he admitted, then tried to reclaim dignity. But I have advisors. I rely on my team. Sheikh Alexander nodded once, as if the admission completed a pattern. And yet you laughed when a young woman corrected you, he said. You dismissed her because of where she stood, not because of what she said. Grant's face flushed red. That is not fair, he snapped, then caught himself and tried to soften. It is complicated. Sheikh Alexander turned slightly toward the attorney beside him. How long would it take to revise this contract properly, with mirrored language and independent review? The attorney glanced at the page, then at the room. If we do it correctly, an hour, she said. Possibly two. A ripple of panic moved through the table. Someone whispered about cameras downstairs. Someone else murmured about investors. Grant seized the opening. We do not have 2 hours, he said quickly. The press will turn on us. The market will interpret it as instability. Sheikh Alexander's expression did not change. Then let them, he said. The simplicity of it stunned the room. Wealthy people often spoke about principles, but they rarely used them when there was a price attached. I will not buy calm with my signature, Sheikh Alexander continued. Not tonight. He pushed the contract slightly away from himself, making a small space on the table as if clearing room for something more honest. Then, without warning, he turned his attention to Lily Carter. Lily, he said, pronouncing her name carefully. How long have you worked in this building? Lily startled, eyes darting to Grant as if she needed permission to answer. 7 years, sir, she said quietly. Sheikh Alexander nodded again. And in 7 years, he asked, voice gentle but exact. How many times have people spoken to you, as if you were not there? Lily swallowed. Emma felt her mother's shame rise, the old instinct to protect herself by pretending it did not hurt. But Lily's eyes flicked to her daughter, and something inside her steadied. More times than I can count, Lily admitted. The room went still again, because now the truth was not only about a contract. It was about a habit, a culture, a way of treating certain people like furniture. Sheikh Alexander looked back at Emma, and his voice softened just a fraction. You did not hijack the narrative, he said. You saved me from it. Grant opened his mouth to object, but no sound came. Because the room had shifted. Not by force, by clarity. And once clarity enters, it is hard to pretend you did not see it. Sheikh Alexander's last sentence lingered in the penthouse like the final note of a piano key, the kind you feel in your ribs more than you hear. The executives did not know where to place their hands anymore. Their confidence had always relied on momentum, on the assumption that money and status would keep everything moving forward no matter what was true. Now momentum had been replaced by scrutiny. Grant Weller tried to stand, perhaps to reclaim height, perhaps to suggest he could still steer the room, but the motion looked awkward, like a puppet tugged by the wrong string. We can fix this, he said, forcing calm into his voice. We will revise the Arabic, match the English, and everyone leaves happy. That is the goal, correct? He looked around, searching for nods, for agreement, for the old comfort of groupthink. A couple of people nodded reflexively, then stopped, realizing how foolish nodding looked when truth was on speakerphone only moments ago. Madeline Pierce softened her tone again, the social glue she always used when corners got sharp. Nobody wants conflict, she said, smiling at Sheikh Alexander as though they were close friends. We all respect your caution. Let us just keep this private and proceed. Keep this private. Emma heard the phrase and understood what it really meant. Keep it quiet so nothing changes. Keep it quiet so the same people can keep winning the same way tomorrow. Lily Carter's shoulders sank slightly, as if she had been holding up the ceiling of her own fear, and it was finally getting too heavy. Emma wanted to reach for her mother's hand, but she did not, because she had learned that comfort in public could be treated like weakness. Sheikh Alexander looked past Grant and Madeline and addressed the entire table. You are right, he said evenly. Nobody wants conflict, but some people rely on avoiding it. He turned the contract so everyone could see the Arabic paragraph. Then he did something none of them expected. He asked Emma to read it again, out loud, not as a performance, but as a demonstration. Emma's throat tightened. She could feel the room trying to compress her into a stereotype. The maid's daughter. The help. the disruption. But she also felt something steadier now, a quiet line of dignity that did not bend to their opinions. She read the clause in Arabic, clear and measured, then translated it into plain English, phrase by phrase, showing where the meaning slipped, where the burden moved, where the trap was hidden. She did not insult anyone. She did not dramatize. She simply revealed. When she finished, the attorney nodded. Another lawyer across the table exhaled slowly, as if he had been holding his breath for 20 minutes. Grant's eyes darted to Madeline. Madeline's smile vanished completely for a second, revealing something colder beneath. Sheikh Alexander folded his hands. "Here is what will happen," he said, voice calm, "because I prefer solutions to spectacle." He looked at the attorney. "We will revise the contract properly. We will mirror the Arabic and the English. We will use independent review. And we will not sign until it is clean." Grant opened his mouth, already forming protest, but Sheikh Alexander continued without giving him space. "Second," he said, "the negotiation team on your side is changing." He pointed, not aggressively, just precisely. "Grant Weller, you will step away from this deal." The words were quiet, but they landed like a curtain dropping. Grant's face went pale. "You cannot just," he began. "I can," Sheikh Alexander replied, still mild. "This is my signature." Grant's lips pressed together so hard they turned white at the edges. Madeline leaned in, voice sharp now, the sugar gone. "This is ridiculous," she snapped. "Over one clause. Over a girl showing off." Emma felt Lily's body tense beside her, fear turning into a protective readiness, like a mother preparing to absorb a blow of consequences. But Sheikh Alexander did not look at Lily or Emma with pity. He looked at Madeline with something simpler, disappointment. "It is not one clause," he said. "It is a pattern." Then he turned to Emma. "You said responsibility should follow fault," he reminded her. "I agree." He looked back at Grant. "If this was an oversight, the person responsible will have no trouble explaining the chain of review. If it was deliberate, the person responsible will have no trouble being identified." Grant swallowed, eyes flicking toward the document, toward the attorney, toward the door. For a moment his confidence cracked, and in that crack the truth showed. He had expected the maid's daughter to stay silent. He had expected the billionaire to sign for the cameras. He had expected the room to protect him because rooms like this always did. Sheikh Alexander lifted his phone again, not to call another expert, but to send one message. Within seconds, an assistant entered quietly, carrying a slim folder and a tablet. Sheikh Alexander did not raise his voice as he spoke to the assistant, yet every person at the table leaned in as if volume had nothing to do with authority. "Pause the press downstairs," he said. "Tell them the signing is delayed because we are correcting a translation discrepancy." Grant jolted. "You cannot tell them that," he hissed. "That makes us look incompetent." Sheikh Alexander's eyes remained steady. "It makes us look honest," he corrected. The word honest hung in the air like a challenge. Emma felt her pulse steady again. The room was not freezing now because of her Arabic. It was freezing because a billionaire had chosen truth over convenience in front of everyone. And in that moment, Emma realized the real reveal was not her fluency. It was the fact that the most powerful man in the room was finally refusing to pretend. The assistant returned from the doorway with the tablet still in hand, and the atmosphere in the penthouse shifted from panic to controlled damage control. It was not loud, it was not chaotic, but you could feel the pressure behind every polite expression, like steam trapped under glass. Grant Weller stood rigid beside his chair, trying to look like a man who still belonged at the table, but his eyes kept flicking toward the exit as if he could slip away before consequences grew teeth. Madeline Pierce's posture remained elegant, yet her smile had turned into something sharp and thin, a social weapon she had used for years to keep the right people comfortable and the wrong people quiet. Sheikh Alexander Alston did not look rushed. He did not look pleased. He looked settled, like a man who had finally placed something heavy down. "Delayed for a translation discrepancy," he repeated softly, as if tasting the phrase. "That is honest. And honesty travels faster than any press release." He turned to the attorney beside him. "Begin the revision," he said. "Mirror the intent in both languages. No ambiguity. No hidden burden." The attorney nodded and began outlining steps with the calm efficiency of someone who had waited her entire career for clients who valued integrity over speed. A second lawyer across the table opened a laptop, already drafting clean language. Grant tried to wedge himself back into the process. I can assist, he said quickly. I know the structure. I can make this efficient. Sheikh Alexander's gaze did not lift, yet his refusal was unmistakable. You can assist by stepping back, he said. I need people who are not invested in confusion. Grant's face tightened. You are making a mistake, he said, voice rising just enough to betray him. You are letting sentiment and optics sabotage a major partnership. Sheikh Alexander finally looked directly at him. No, he said, still quiet. I am letting clarity prevent sabotage. The words were simple, and that simplicity left Grant with nowhere to hide. Madeline leaned toward Sheikh Alexander again, her voice lowered, intimate, as if they were on the same side, and he had simply forgotten. This is a lot of drama, she murmured. And drama has a way of sticking to people. You do not want the wrong headlines. A young girl correcting a clause makes a cute story, but you do not want it to become a scandal. Emma heard the word cute and felt the old insult wrapped inside it. She kept her hands folded, her face calm, but her stomach tightened. Lily stood beside the cart, eyes down, shoulders drawn in, bracing for a punishment that had not arrived yet, but always did in her experience. Sheikh Alexander's expression did not change. A scandal, he repeated. Then he turned his head slightly, looking at Madeline as though she had just revealed more than she intended. The only scandal would be signing something I do not agree to, he said, or allowing people to be dismissed because they wear the wrong uniform. Madeline's cheeks flushed. She lifted her chin, as if pride could outrun accountability. You are being dramatic, she said, sharper now. She is a child. Her mother is staff. This is not their world. The sentence was meant to put Emma back in her place. It did something else instead. It drew a clean line in the room, separating those who believed dignity belonged to everyone from those who believed it was a privilege you could purchase. Sheikh Alexander stood, slowly, and the movement made every person at the table straighten as if pulled by strings. You are right, he said, and Madeline's eyes gleamed with premature victory. Then he finished the thought. This is not their world, he said. It is a world people like you built. And that means people like me can change it. The silence that followed was not awkward. It was reverent, the kind that comes when a room realizes it has been living by rules that were never noble. Sheikh Alexander turned toward Lily Carter. Lily, he said, voice gentle. You have served this building for 7 years. Who hired you? Lily blinked, startled. The agency, sir, she said. Then building management. Sheikh Alexander nodded. And who speaks to you when something goes wrong? Lily swallowed. Usually, Mr. Weller, she admitted, eyes darting to Grant. Grant's jaw tightened. Sheikh Alexander looked back at Grant, the disappointment in his gaze now unmistakable. So you have power over her livelihood, he said softly. And you still felt comfortable mocking her daughter in front of me. Grant's mouth opened, but no clean defense existed. He tried anyway. I did not mock her, he said. I was managing the room. Emma felt Lily's shoulders shake with one small breath, as if the truth had finally been named aloud and her body did not know how to hold it. Sheikh Alexander's voice stayed calm. You were managing a hierarchy, he corrected. Then he turned to Emma. Emma Carter, he said, I asked you to help me do this cleanly. You have. He paused, and the pause felt like the room leaning forward together. Now I will do my part. He looked to his assistant at the doorway. Effective immediately, he said. Grant Weller is removed from all negotiations involving my company. Document it. Notify counsel. And if there has been any retaliation or pressure placed on Lily Carter in the past, I want a full review. Grant went still, as if the air had thickened around him. Madeline's face tightened, and for the first time she looked uncertain. Lily's eyes widened, tears finally threatening to spill, not from sadness, but from shock at being protected instead of blamed. Emma felt her own breath catch, because she realized the justice in this room was not loud. It was precise. It was written in decisions, not speeches. And as the attorneys began rewriting the contract with clean, mirrored language, the penthouse no longer felt like a stage where Emma had trespassed. It felt like a place where truth had finally been given a chair at the table. The lawyers moved with quiet speed, fingers gliding over keyboards, voices kept low, the way professionals speak when the stakes are high and the client has made it clear that shortcuts are not welcome. The contract on the leather table began to transform from a polished trap into a clean document. line by line, meaning mirrored in both languages the way it should have been from the start. Outside the glass walls, the city kept sparkling, oblivious, but inside the penthouse the air felt different now, less like perfume and more like oxygen. Grant Weller had not left yet, but he no longer had a seat at the table. He stood near the edge of the room, holding himself stiffly, face carefully blank, as if dignity could be maintained by refusing to move. Madeline Pierce lingered too, her elegance now strained, her eyes tracking every decision Sheikh Alexander made as though she was watching a door close that she had always assumed would stay open for her. Lily Carter remained by the cleaning cart, still in uniform, still trying to make herself small out of habit, but her shoulders had loosened slightly, as if her body was beginning to understand it might not have to brace for impact. Emma stood beside her mother, hands folded, quiet again, not because she was silenced, but because she had said what needed to be said, and now she was watching the world respond. Sheikh Alexander stepped away from the table and walked to the window, looking down at the street far below. The press waited somewhere in the building, hungry for sound bites and smiles. Investors waited for certainty. Headlines waited to be written. He stood there for a moment, as if measuring what mattered more, speed or truth. Then he turned back, calm as ever. "How long?" he asked the attorney. "Until the revised Arabic matches the English precisely?" 30 to 40 minutes, the attorney replied. "We are confirming every term." Sheikh Alexander nodded. "Good," he said. Then he looked at his assistant. "Send a statement downstairs," he said, voice steady. "Tell them we delayed to ensure linguistic accuracy and fairness. That we believe precision is respect. Precision is respect." Emma felt the phrase settle into her chest, warm and heavy at the same time. It sounded like something Walter Reed would have said, simple enough to remember, strong enough to live by. Madeline scoffed under her breath, too quiet for most, but Emma heard it. "Fairness," Madeline murmured, with a faint curl of disdain. "What a performance." Sheikh Alexander's gaze flicked to her, not angry, just attentive. "It is only a performance when it is fake," he said. "Tonight, it is necessary." Madeline's face tightened, and she turned away as if she had better things to look at than accountability. Lily's eyes filled again, and this time a tear escaped, sliding down her cheek before she could stop it. She wiped it quickly with the edge of her sleeve, embarrassed, but Sheikh Alexander noticed. He walked toward Lily, not too close, careful not to corner her, and spoke in a voice meant for her, not for the room. "You have nothing to be ashamed of," he said. Lily's lips trembled. "I am sorry," she whispered automatically, the reflex of someone trained to apologize for existing. Sheikh Alexander's expression softened. "Do not apologize," he said. "Not here." Emma watched her mother's face, and in that moment she realized how deep the habit ran. Lily had survived by shrinking, by smoothing things over, by saying sorry before anyone could accuse her. Seeing a man like Sheikh Alexander refuse that script felt unreal, like watching gravity change direction. "Emma," Sheikh Alexander said, turning to her, "you spoke with care. You did not humiliate anyone. You simply told the truth." Emma swallowed. "I was afraid," she admitted quietly. "Not for me. For my mom." Lily flinched at her own name being said so plainly in this room. Sheikh Alexander nodded as if he understood that fear personally. "A society that punishes honesty from the powerless is a society that rewards deception from the privileged," he said. "I do not want my name on that kind of deal." Across the room, Grant Weller shifted, as if the words had finally reached him. He forced a small laugh, brittle and resentful. "You are making this into a moral lecture," he said. "It is business." Sheikh Alexander looked at him for a long moment. "Business is where morality hides when it is afraid to be seen," he replied. Grant's face hardened. "You are going to regret humiliating me," he muttered, not loud, but loud enough to leave a stain in the air. Lily stiffened instantly, fear snapping back into place. Emma's stomach tightened. But Sheikh Alexander's response was immediate, calm, and final. "Threats," he said, "are evidence." He looked at his assistant. "Document that," he instructed. Grant's mouth opened, then closed. Madeline's eyes widened for a split second. Lily's breath caught, then released shakily. Emma felt something inside her unclench, as if her life had been holding a tension it did not realize could be released. The attorney returned with a printed page, fresh text, clean alignment, mirrored intent. "We have the revised clause," she said. Sheikh Alexander took it, read it, and nodded once. "Now," he said, "we can sign something that does not require anyone to be invisible." He glanced at Emma again. "And when this is done," he added softly, "I want to hear more about Walter Reed." Emma's throat tightened, but this time it was not fear. It was the ache of realizing that a man who had been walked past had left a legacy strong enough to change a penthouse full of powerful people. The clock on the table still sat frozen, red numbers paused, waiting for permission. Sheikh Alexander reached toward it, not to rush, but to resume time on his own terms. "Let it run," he said, and the numbers began moving again. But now they felt less like a threat and more like a promise. The red numbers on the clock began to move again, and strangely, the room felt lighter the moment time restarted, as if everyone could finally stop pretending they were not trapped inside a countdown. The revised pages sat on the leather table crisp and clean, the Arabic and English now aligned like two mirrors facing the same truth. The attorneys read the final lines aloud in measured voices, and every time a term appeared, they confirmed the match, not just in meaning but in intent. No one smiled for the cameras yet. No one tried to turn the moment into a joke. Even the air seemed more honest, less perfumed by ego. Sheikh Alexander Alston took the pen at last, but he did not rush. He paused with the tip hovering above the signature line, looking around the table as if he wanted the room to understand what was happening beneath the paperwork. "This," he said softly, "is what respect looks like in writing." Then he signed, smooth and unshaken, and the agreement was sealed without anyone having to swallow deception to keep the peace. The assistant received the signed pages and moved quickly, and within moments the distant murmur of staff in the hallway shifted into motion, like a building exhaling after holding its breath. Downstairs, the press would still get their headline, but now it would not be built on a lie. Grant Weller stood near the edge of the room, face carefully blank, but the blankness had turned into a kind of quiet defeat. He was not dragged out, not shamed theatrically, not given a scene to perform. He was simply removed from relevance, which for a man like Grant was its own kind of consequence. Madeline Pierce gathered her purse with stiff elegance, eyes hard, and offered Sheikh Alexander a tight smile that did not reach her face. "Congratulations," she said, the word sounding like it had corners. Sheikh Alexander nodded once, polite and distant, and did not invite her back into comfort. When Madeline walked out, her heels sounded louder than they should have on marble, as if the building itself wanted to remember the moment she left. Lily Carter remained by the cart, unsure what to do with her hands now that she was no longer being treated like furniture. Emma stood beside her, feeling the aftershock of what had happened, the way adrenaline fades into disbelief. She half expected someone to tell them to go, to return to invisibility now that the important people had finished their important work. Instead, Sheikh Alexander turned toward them and closed the distance with careful respect, stopping a few feet away so Lily would not feel cornered. "Lily Carter," he said, voice gentle, "your job in this building is not to be invisible. It is to do honest work, and you have done it." Lily's eyes filled again, and this time she did not wipe them away immediately. "Thank you, sir," she managed, and the words sounded unfamiliar in her mouth, like gratitude that was allowed to exist without apology. Sheikh Alexander nodded, then looked at Emma. "Emma," he said, "I asked you where you learned Arabic. You told me about Walter Reed." Emma's throat tightened. "He was kind," she said simply. "He did not want me to feel trapped." Sheikh Alexander's gaze softened, and for a moment the billionaire's wealth and power felt secondary to something quieter, something older. "Kindness," he said, "is the rarest form of intelligence." He glanced at his assistant. "Bring me the building directory," he said, "and the employment records for the agency that placed Lily." The assistant nodded and stepped away. Lily stiffened, fear flickering back for a second, but Sheikh Alexander lifted a hand gently. "Not to punish you," he said, as if reading her mind. "To protect you." Lily's breath shook as it left her lungs. Emma felt her own eyes sting, but she blinked it back, because she did not want this to look like pleading. Sheikh Alexander continued, "No retaliation will touch you. If anyone tries, they will be dealing with my legal team, not your silence." Emma looked at her mother and saw something she had rarely seen, relief that did not look guilty, relief that did not have to hide. The attorney gathered the final documents, and offered Sheikh Alexander a small nod. "It is clean," she said. "It is fair." Sheikh Alexander nodded back. "Good," he replied. "Let fairness be the standard, not the exception." Outside the penthouse, the city glittered the same way it always did, indifferent to who was praised and who was overlooked. But inside this room, something had shifted that could not be polished back into hiding. Lily Carter, a woman who had spent 7 years being spoken over, had been spoken to. Emma Carter, a girl who had learned to survive by blending into the wallpaper, had been listened to like her words mattered. Sheikh Alexander looked at them both, and his voice lowered, sincere and steady. "When you are ready," he said, "I would like to hear more about Walter. And I would like to know what you want next, Emma. Not what the world expects of you. What you want." Emma swallowed, the question landing like a door opening into a future she had never allowed herself to imagine. And in that quiet space between marble and skyline, she realized the night had not only corrected a contract, it had corrected a way of seeing. Emma did not answer right away. The question was too clean, too generous, like sunlight in a room where she had only ever learned to live by shadows. For most of her life, wanting had been a luxury. You did what you could, you took what you were given, and you tried not to make anyone with power feel inconvenienced by your existence. She glanced at Lily, and her mother's face held a soft disbelief, as if Lily was watching the universe break one of its own rules. The penthouse, with its marble and glass and quiet wealth, had stopped feeling like a place that could swallow them whole. It felt, for the first time, like a place that had to make room. Emma drew in a slow breath. "I want to study languages," she said, voice steady but small. "Not just to speak them, to understand people, to catch the places where meaning gets manipulated." She did not say the word trapped again, but it lived underneath her sentence. Sheikh Alexander nodded, the way someone nods when they hear a truth that does not need decoration. "Good," he said simply. "Then you will." Lily's hand lifted a fraction, then fell back to her side, unsure whether reaching for her daughter in front of rich people was allowed. Emma felt the urge to apologize for dreaming out loud, the old reflex rising like a wave, but she forced it down. Sheikh Alexander turned to his assistant, his voice quiet and practical. "Set up a scholarship fund," he said. "Full coverage. Tuition, books, transportation. Include a stipend so she does not have to choose between learning and eating." He said it the way people like him discussed calendars, as if caring was a form of logistics. Lily's breath caught sharply. "Sir, we cannot," she began, because she had spent years refusing help before it could be taken away. Sheikh Alexander lifted a hand gently. "You can," he corrected, not sternly, but with certainty. "Because this is not charity. It is an investment in someone who protected my company when paid professionals did not." He looked at Emma. "And because Walter Reed did not teach you to be invisible. He taught you to see." Emma's throat tightened, and in her mind she saw Walter's window again, his old radio, his finger tracing letters with patient care. She had always wondered if his kindness mattered in the grand world, if it left any footprint at all. Tonight, in a penthouse above Manhattan, it mattered. It echoed. The attorney gathered the final documents and stepped away, and the room began to loosen into quiet movement as staff prepared to escort guests and reset the space. Grant Weller was gone now, removed not with drama but with inevitability, and that absence felt like fresh air. Madeline Pierce had already left, and no one chased her. No one begged her to stay. That, too, felt like a new kind of justice. Sheikh Alexander turned back toward Lily. "Lily," he said, "I am also reviewing your employment arrangement. No more agency fees taking advantage of you. If you want to stay in this building, you will be hired directly with benefits and a wage that reflects the work you do." Lily's eyes widened, and this time tears fell freely, not messy, not performative, just human. "I have always tried to do everything right," she whispered. I never thought it would matter." Sheikh Alexander's expression softened. "It always mattered," he said. "The world simply pretended it did not." Emma stood very still, feeling a quiet calm settle over her like a warm coat. She understood, then, that dignity was not something you earned by being perfect. It was something you carried, even when people tried to strip it away. And tonight, someone with the power to enforce respect had chosen to do it, not because it looked good, but because it was right. As the assistant returned with a folder of next steps, Sheikh Alexander glanced once more at the contract, now clean and fair, and then at Emma and Lily, still in the same uniforms and simple clothes they had worn when they were mocked. Nothing about their appearance had changed. Only the room's understanding had. Emma looked out at the city lights again, and for the first time, they did not feel like a world locked behind glass. They felt like possibilities. Somewhere down on a quiet street, people were still being underestimated in 1,000 small ways every day. And Emma realized the lesson Walter had tried to teach her was not just about language. It was about worth. True worth does not announce itself with money or titles. Sometimes it stands beside a cleaning cart, speaks one honest sentence, and makes an entire room go silent.